tonight. I never really know exactly when this picks up. But I'll assume it's going right now. And I want to welcome everybody to today's um, show, Exploring the New Age. Me, Julien Wells, and Don Murphy.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Julien.
Good evening. It looks like the chat room has already started. I'm glad to see some of our old friends there. And a quick reminder that today we wanted to answer questions between Don and I, helping out people who had some specific questions. We didn't get that many, but we did get a really good one. And I'll tell you what, Don, I'm going to post that in the chat.
Okay.
Our personal chat, so that you can check that out yourself. And of course, that is not what's in my clipboard. Basically, I'm going to have you read it.
Okay, well, I haven't received it. Oh, there we go. It's from Ed Fisher. I have a question about the one fear that most people have, death. My fiance believes that when our body dies, that's it. I don't believe that at all, but I'm still a little scared of growing old and leaving my body. How do I get over that fear? I recently started to find myself and had a lot of luck doing so with your shows and a family member that's been pointing me in the right direction. I still can't help to think about the end experience and what happens when we get old and die.
Okay.
Great question.
Yeah, and when I remember reading it, I realized that there's quite a few factors that are tied into dying. There's a lot of associations that we make presumptions about, in which dying can kind of steer the way our life, will operate, because we have certain beliefs, or certain expectations, or certain concerns. So it was only recently, it was in the last couple months or so, where I got some very distinct communications and clarifications about dying that really, I can't really put it any other way, it really excited me, actually. And I put kind of all the pieces together. But before I go into that, I'm just going to let people know the reason why there's a different setting here is I'm now working in a different room where I don't have my baby in the background, or Sebastian and Bethany being in the background, and it shouldn't be too loud with the train that goes by every once in a while. So, thumbs up, I got a space now, it's a little bit better. And it is outdoors and doesn't have heating yet, so that's why I'm wearing a toque and a sweater. But I'm sure everyone else watching this is nice and cozy and doesn't get cold just looking at me being a little bit cold. But back to the question, and we'll get some insight later as to what the Pleiadians want to share on this, because they got involved in their own perspective during the time that I was getting this message. The biggest surprise that many people are going to get is that you don't have to die. Now, what I mean by that is you may die, but you can come back. Many people do come back, and they say this is what it was like in the afterlife and stuff like that. But most people who do die don't get to retain that experience, and they don't actually continue on going where they were before. So they'll actually re-emerge in their body like before the opportunity they had to die. Okay. Now, if it's one of those senses where you're growing old and feeble and you've been, we'll call it getting sort of tired of living, when you die, it would just seem like a logical reason is to go on and have a healthier body and start all over. But the dying experience is, when you go through it, you'll find out that it's an option to go back. If anyone's familiar with the Bill Murray movie Ground Hog Day, that's kind of it. You'll wake up again in a point in your past before you die, essentially negating the timeline that you just existed. Now, you don't come back exactly the same, and it's not necessarily when you wake up in the morning. It can be at any moment that you decide is appropriate to sort of like, hit continue. And that's using like, video game metaphor. But it starts out in this way where you revisit what happened and what led to you sort of quitting on yourself. Now, you might not call it quitting. You could say, I was killed or something like that. But ultimately, whatever you did in order to die was something that you brought into your experience somehow. And that it was, I wouldn't say destined, but it was part of your process for learning. And many people would say, well, what's so good about, being dead? Well, there's a lot of things that are great about being dead. And one is you have no self-judgment in the way that humans do and engage your life. It's like you have a much broader perspective. It's like being in the position of your higher self where you can see everything going on. The difference is that your higher self doesn't exactly run your life. Your body needs to go on, auto run. It needs to sort of play out its, explorations of its own thoughts and developing experiences, which we call beliefs, and then our mind memorizing and understands. So when the higher self is involved in our lives, it's involved in such a way that we will get messages and guidance, and will also be motivated in various ways. But we are essentially, in many ways, in this life, giving this body and this mind and this intelligence kind of a creative sovereignty to mix and match what it goes about. It's like, it's as if on some levels we're like robots, but we're learning how to live life. So we're like given the opportunity for expanding our consciousness, which expands our capabilities. So if you can think of any sort of robot movie, maybe iRobot or whatever, where the robot, lives long enough that it starts to act like a human and become like a human, that's more or less what this experience is like. We're expanding and descending our soul and our higher self into this body through practice, and getting this opportunity where we can explore from a brand new perspective, a brand new expanded point of view. So when you die, you get to see the expanded point of view. Just matter of fact that you have an expanded point of view. But the experience of having the human body gives you the chance to practice another kind of creation, a very unique kind of creation, a very desirable form of creation. And even though most people, listening to this, or an average awake person, will say, "Well, I don't have choice over my life. I've got all these conditions that I'm stuck with." That's for us to realize in this place and now that we have a lot of choice. And we end up actually having not the ultimate choice of should we live or die, but we have choices over everything. So going back to the question, this fear of dying presumes that you have to die. But in every timeline that I've seen going forward, humans will live an extended life. Humans will live up to thousands of years now. That there is no need to expire until you choose to. Now, you may notice, even though I've said that people around you are dying. I mean, that's a fact of life. People are leaving our lives, but it's much more a matter of people leaving our experience. Now, they can do it in any number of ways. They can say, you know, I'm getting divorced, I don't want to see you anymore. Or they can die and not have to explain themselves. Or they can say, I'm moving to another country. Any number of ways in which people leave their experience. However, in every single circumstance, there's a message. There's a message in terms of how the person died. That message is unique to you, because everybody has their own perspective of what somebody's experienced when they die in the life that you're observing as your own. So, dying is a useful message tool. We'll just leave it at that for the moment.
Well, Julien, can you know, there's a lot of people that talk about the fact that our lifetimes here and our experience here on Earth is a classroom. They refer to it as a classroom, that we're here to learn lessons and eventually graduate. And so, given what you were just talking about, how do you compare, contrast that idea?
So, I'll put it back in the context of a robot becoming consciously aware. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We can be more aware than we currently are. Now, we have fundamentally, in order to do so, we have to be given more choices. Unlike the animal kingdom that has fewer choices and fewer things to consider, humans and the size of their brain has led to an experience that's unique, where we get to observe our own creations while being in the creation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So through that process, we can delineate points of value and points in which to focus on for progress. And the progress is always in the direction of, let's bring more energy. Energy is another form of describing consciousness. And we have a soul, which contains the amassed experiences of many lifetimes, human and other. And we bring in the energy, which is like kind of like the knowledge of our past lives and the energy of our past lives, and we bring it in succinctly so in order to try things on a different way now in this life. Now, when talking about the graduation or the tests, it's about integrating. It's about integrating these possibilities into this world, and the mind, the body, the ego, is basically finding a way to calibrate in which it can process this energy. So love is one way of describing it, which is another way of saying there's a lot of energy flowing through you. So when there's a lot of energy flowing through you, you essentially feel energized, and your actions take on a more powerful approach. Okay? But they tend to have context. The context is within the parameters of your belief. So you may feel energized in this direction, maybe not in another direction. And so the ultimate goal here is for the body, mind, and ego to find a way in which it can adopt, with the fewest number of rules, more energy. So even though we have rules, the rules give the energy context. It's almost like it has meaning if it can be observed. And so there's some beliefs, and there's some grounding, and there's some experiences that are altogether fundamentally useful for being able to observe the concept of progress. And this is just one reality in which you can do that. You are a part of multiple realities. However, talking about the dream state reality and others that stem off from that is not the main function for the human body. It does in the sense that it associates with parts of the human experience and why dreaming is associated with the human experience. Let's put it another way. If you were given $1 billion alone, no one else is given $1 billion, if you were given $1 billion and you were asked to spend that in 60 days, how would you do it? What would you do? That's almost exactly the same kind of challenge we're given. Okay? If you were given the potential to do anything, how would you do it? Well, you'd start organizing your thoughts in terms of sorting out what you feel was best, and you would do your best to, given the conditions, as in this human life, how can someone use $1 billion? Like, how can one go about doing that? And so you play within the parameters. You play within the test, within the confines of the equation of what the test says is possible. Now, when you're done with a test and saying, I'm no longer limited by that test, I would like one that has more options, more multiple choice options, then you do that. You expand to a place where you have more choices. Humans essentially have more multiple choice choices in the quiz than animals do. And where we're going, there's even more. But how do you navigate when the multiple choice answers the quiz goes from A to Z? It's not A, B, or C. It's not even true or false.
For you Americans, that was A to Z.
A to Z, sorry.
It's okay. Just translating.
So in this place and time and now, the test is I think I can find the answer in a test that goes from A to E. And once I've passed that test enough and I feel like I've got, I've provided an excellent answer and received an excellent experience, give me, A through F. And then G, and it keeps going.
Well, and what I feel like what you're saying though is that this is a very personal experience, as opposed to like with my question that as if there's a curriculum in order to live a life on this planet. It's not that way. This is a very personal experience, and what we come back with and what we show and what energy we move with is an individual personal basis that we share collectively.
Well, we share a couple of similar parameters.
Right.
Our test is custom tailored to us, but we share a lot of the same questions too.
There's yes. Do you want to move on to another comment, or you want to finish here?
Let's revisit the question itself.
Okay.
Just one more time. I'm going to read the part where it says, "How do I get over my fear?"
Good question.
Growing old, basically, right? And basically, the fear is, we'll call it, one of the biggest parts of the test, one of the biggest parameters we must live with. This idea of the body expiring. Now, even though I said we must live with it, anybody that could remember their experience of dying and coming back would say you don't. You can screw up as many times as you want. But the point of screwing up, you will need to choose a different timeline and adjust the timeline when you come back. So let's just say you get whacked by a car across the street. If you want to come back and not run into the exact same equation, you'll have to change the timeline. You have to change something. You have to make it so that, some lady gets in your way so that you don't show up on that street at the exact same time. So and this has happened many times for many people, they would say, oh, I'm going to make something cross my path and it gives me pause, like a black cat. It's been used more often than others. And so you take pause and you walk forward and the car goes spinning by and you didn't even know that you were in danger. Okay? And so you move on with your life. And then you cross the next street and you hit by a car. 5 minutes later. So when you review your life and you say, well, I dodged the first car, but I got hit by another car. What's up with that? Like what gives, And from that perspective, the broader perspective, you say, oh, I didn't change the equation of why it's a car I'm getting hit by. Like I've got a beef with cars and getting hit by them for some reason. Or my vibration didn't fundamentally elevate, and so in the low vibration of feeling like death was a bad thing, I got death. So from that broader perspective, you take your time. You do sort of like a review of all the circumstances, and you say, it looks like if I keep this train of thought, I'm bound for doom. Like, all roads lead to dying, right? Like, all possibilities lead to dying, but that's not true. And when you're, from a broader perspective, can resolve that, you don't go so much like you go all the way to heaven, okay? When you go to heaven, you say, I don't even remember my life. I don't care. Like, I don't give a whip about learning stuff there. So instead of going all the way to heaven, you're basically at the doorway saying, hey, you want to go back and give another shot? You don't have to come in to heaven if you don't want. So you get that life review, and you usually get a life review on what's important. And then what's important is showing you, these decisions you made in life led you to attracting getting run over. And so you say, oh, well, then in order to stop thinking about getting run over, I'm going to have to introduce a couple things into my experience. So you get, you say, well, how about this? Let's get myself to attract, this idea that I'm not afraid of cars hitting me. And you say, well, it's a tall order. That probably involves a lot of complex things. But, you're up to the task. And your higher self is up to the task. So, all right, toss me back in the game at the point that it works. Now, whether you die or not, you have future selves coming back, reissuing suggestions and changing your time right now. So imagine that this isn't just one death that you're having, but you're having realities in which you're dying all the time. Like millions of times. Millions of possible ways in which you die. Okay? And the ones in which you are dying are the ones in which you're afraid of dying, which is basically challenging yourself to not be afraid of dying and yet subjecting yourself to all the conditions in which you would be afraid to die. So, and even the concept of not dying, it's even like, getting the job and not getting the job. Many people think, I interviewed for the job and I should have gotten it. No, you got what you're supposed to get. You always do, because you have 1,000 versions of different things you have attempted, and you've revisited back and you're experiencing this present moment where you didn't get the job. It's better off you did, because for all sorts of reasons that are personal. So this gets into talking about timelines a little bit, but ultimately the reason why you die is in the succumbing of fear and deciding that you don't want to come back. But that saying where you don't want to come back, let that choice be after you've died, if that's a preferable purpose. But in the question, it's pointing out that they have a fear of dying, meaning that's ultimately not what they want. They want to live. Okay? So if you want to live, find out how to live. Don't try to find out how to avoid dying. Find out what living is. And in doing so, you'll never be presented the opportunities to die if it doesn't suit the learning process. If it doesn't suit the learning experience. I mean, saying that you die is like saying if you don't pass every exam in school, we flunk you out of school. No more school for you. So you have to get every exam, ace. And that's not the case. There is no predefined judgment for dying. You can even commit suicide and there's no judgment. You say, yeah, you still think that's the best option from the, from the out-of-body space? I say, well, maybe not. But at least I tried it out. At least I found out what gives when it comes to that. And the greatest example, well, one of the bigger issues for why most people don't know this is because if you knew you can do it over like Groundhog Day, this world would have different rules. People would just be doing whatever they want constantly. And if you knew that other people could do that too, you'd feel very overwhelmed by too many possibilities. So the death is a current restriction on possibilities for the sake of not factoring in infinite possibilities. Now the Pleiadians, for instance, they live in infinite possibilities compared to us. But they do have their own limits. They do have their own boxes. They do these things where they say, I can't, and I'm not going to try going beyond a certain point in doing something. Now what those are neither here nor there. We'll find out one day. But for us, death is something that we are going to transcend. It is within our DNA to transcend the living death, and we will go through ego deaths in order to accomplish that. The ego deaths are this element where you go through vast transformations of yourself, so much so that you are free from limitation and fears. So, let death be what it's going to be. It's not going to pose you any troubles, as far as you can tell, unless you're focusing on it being something that you should trouble yourself with. Okay? I want to explain very briefly that I came across a stage of heaven. Now, humans live in a stage of heaven, but there are different heavens, and they have numbers, as in tiers of vibration. And you may move on to a different heaven. So you'll live in a heaven in which the rules are loosened up on the idea of dying, for instance. And even things eventually like loosened up on the idea of having to have gravity, where you can fly, things like that. But this heaven, there's the 7th that's popular, there's the 9th, and there's the 11th. This 9th heaven is known as Cloud 9 to me. It was explained to me by the inhabitants of Cloud 9. And Cloud 9 involved lots of people who, in my life pathway, had died. These are people who had died. Including Michael Jackson, Robin Williams, Hitler, all sorts of people that died here. But they didn't actually die on their universal timeline. So they had an experience that I need to see them die for my own reasons, for my own developing path. And we can say, I just told you, Robin Williams died, and as I'm addressing you, the audience, and Dawn, in my reality, you will all agree that Robin Williams died, right? So did Michael Jackson, he died. And Elvis Presley died, and John Lennon died. Now, all these people, in particular, if you know enough about them to say they were all wonderful people, and they should not have died, because they had such wonderful things to bring to the world. Well, ask yourself the question that I did, which is why did they die in my experience? Because they had lifetimes where they didn't. They went on in other lives where they did not die, that they continued to be themselves just as we benefited from them. Michael Jackson being a wonderful inspiration, John Little being a wonderful inspiration. All these individuals were wonderful inspirations. Why did they not persist in this reality? Well, there's certain elements that coincide with the tragic death, which says what they had is going to be felt as a loss. At the same time, we have the opportunity for bringing that forward and saying it's not going unmissed. We're going to revitalize that, and we're not going to say he's the only one that could do that. We're going to idolize what they did. We're going to idolize that energy, bring it forward. That's not the only reason. There's different reasons for each person, but oftentimes it's like it immortalizes the perfection, and that perfection vibrationally is something we're also trying to achieve. As they move into a vibrational perfection that we did not belong in. It's like they moved on to another heaven, another reality where who they were, as authentic as they were to themselves and to those around them, they fit into that world. In this world, they're obtuse. They're in the way. It's not accepted. Okay? They, can get addicted. They can start to look like that they're headed down the path of self-decline. Now, do we witness all the details of the self-decline? Probably not, because they're not as important. But it's fundamental in the way that they belong in a world where they are getting to be themselves. Note, all these individuals I mentioned are kind of, peculiar in our society. But in the society in which each one of us is heading towards, which is the one that's in our heart, where we are our ultimate selves, where we can do as we choose in such a way that we're following our heart and nothing prevents that. That's the direction each one of us is going, which is another way of saying this is our best way of operating a human experience from this personal perspective, and this is how I use this energy, and this is how I find fulfillment, and this fulfillment is a reflection of that loving energy being grounded and being put and being valued in a way that is solidified. A great deal of people's lives are sought in leaving a legacy. And the only legacy you ever need is that of your own experience onto yourself. We have this idea where we leave legacies for others, and that's important, but it's not nearly the same value as leaving a legacy for ourselves. And the idea of dying is okay, but for the most part, it's not necessary. And for the second part, most people are dying simply moving to another timeline, in which the choice of them living a human experience is not compatible with where you are right now. Now, the reason why I'm pointing this out is there is a time in the future where when you move to that higher vibrational transcendence, you'll get to visit everybody who left that appeared to have died. You'll see these rules are quite flexible on other planes of existence. So when I visited the Cloud 9 people, they explained the ascension process quite differently than I understood it. And they basically participate while not occupying a physical body. They participate as guides, and they participate through other means with humans here, light workers, star seeds, what have you, that are ready and willing to make this change on Earth. And they give them downloads, they give them insights, they give them support, they move the mechanisms that they can from their place. And so it starts to look like God's on a cloud, affecting people here down on Earth. And it kind of does look a little bit like that. Cloud 9, as I visited, was actually a cloud above the Earth. The individuals walking around on a solid cloud with experience, much like you would see, Jack and the Beanstalk climbs the beanstalk, is walking amongst the clouds and finds the castle with the giant. Very similar. Okay. And they explain this looping of ascension downloads. So that there's these loops where you wake up more and more during each cycle. And I got to the phase where my cycle where I could see that. And I got very helpful insights from there. They all share their knowledge. They go, it's like they dive off the cloud, holding on to like a fishing rod, with like a line, and they say, whenever this happens, pull me back out, pull me back up. And they learn things, they try things in timelines and help us ascend in such a way that we move to the cloud 9 and beyond. It's not for us to go to cloud 9. Cloud 9 is kind of like a short-term occupation that they pick up in order to get everybody across the line vibrationally. And the way that it's going, the progress that they're saying everybody's going. From our vantage, everybody's is getting this. And in my particular reality point, it's the end of this year. I become so confident for myself that this ascension process is well underway, that it's unstoppable, that everybody's doing so well, that I go on in kind of a direction where I'm quite pleased with what I choose and how I enjoy my creations, in a way that I haven't experienced yet. Not that I'm saying, why don't I do that now? I am. I'm practicing my joys here and there. But this idea that I'm teaching or sharing insights, it'll be a dime a dozen at that point. I will feel like, from my position, everybody knows what I know now, right? Well, many people know what I know now and can participate.
Right.
So, I'm not leaving. We'll still see each other. But I can say that in all honesty, knowing that that I'm going to be through with the concept of struggles for myself at that point. A great deal of struggle. Struggles will be far looser than I've ever seen after that point. It's also extremely likely to have the event at that point too, since the awakening event is for the personal individual to decide. Now, I can say that since the awakening point for humanity is something that I see near the end of this year, many people on this call will receive the same awareness and see the same thing occurring. So from that vein, I can speak to saying, hey, that's what we're all getting at the end of this year. There's such a push and such a level of awakening that we haven't seen before. I can say that truthfully and knowingly that is exactly where I'm going. Now, do I want to change my mind and take some steps back? No. I already know. And I'm already quite happy with that awareness and choice. Now, after saying all that, I'm sure many people don't have the same kind of fears of death. But I don't know who made the original quote, but it goes something like this. Fear of death is the cause of death. Like literally. You don't need to give yourself attention to that. And as a result, too, as that element of fears being cleared by humanity as a whole and healing going on, and death going by the wayside, the only thing that's required for perpetual life is to be in balance with oneself, which is basically having an abundance of energy from your soul always coming through. As long as that's going on, you won't get bored with life, upset with life, or frustrated by life because you won't feel capable. You will feel capable. If you have soul flowing through, you'll always feel like you have the energy to tackle it. It's like your wallet. You always got money in your pocketbook to take it on. Anyhow, that's easy for me to take tangents, and it's taken most of the show just to share that.
Well, but it was great information, Julien. I think it is something that everybody can get something out of.
And yeah, and you'll note by reviewing that, you'll see how death is a tool to use as leverage between individuals. Fear of death can be used. But without the fear at this point, should you accept my invitation and understanding of it, a lot of things will not push your buttons the same way anymore, revealing great opportunities. And in such a way that you won't be given time to something that doesn't really require your attention. Give attention to life, and you'll see that. You can even find life in the experience of death. Like when somebody dear dies, it's the best time to celebrate life. Not in the fact that, well, poor Joe Schmo didn't get to live life, but reviewing how wonderful life really is, and that we are moving forward. It's not this, I got life because somebody else didn't have life. That's another mix-up. The idea where I died to save you. You died for another reason.
Mm.
Anyhow, I did want to get the Pleiadians' take on it.
Okay.
And they would like to talk directly with you, Don.
Oh, great.
So they're saying they're going to ask you some questions, simple questions, so that
awesome.
they can carry on the point they want to make.
Great.
We're speaking with a Pleiadian named Lucinda. She is a birthing Pleiadian. So her job is to create babies and manifest babies.
Welcome, Lucinda.
She's saying it's kind of off topic to try to explain how she does what she does, but she loves what she's doing. And she wants to pose a couple questions. The first is, Dawn, how do you think babies are made? Just in your own words, there's no wrong answer.
It's funny, my 7-year-old asked me that question today. My feeling on it is that babies are made through the choice of all the beings that go into the creation of that, the possibility of that life.
Mm-hmm. Second question is, do babies, after they're born, know that they're babies?
No, I think the baby feels much more powerful than it's able to manifest as far as movement and other things in life. I think the baby becomes much more fully formed than our experience tells us.
Mm-hmm. The next question on top of that one is, can you imagine what power is to a baby? Its understanding of that value. Can you describe it?
What power is to a baby?
You use the word power to describe that it felt empowered.
Yes. The baby is soaking in the new experience. The choice to move from non-physical into physical is an exploration, and the baby moves through that the physical being by being taken care of by parents and that sort of thing, but also but it's just soaking in what's there for the baby to experience. And so that's the empowerment, is that its choices are limitless to itself right there.
That's correct. She's saying she knows that every day in which it learns something is also a day where a limitation has been invited and agreed upon. Now, there are many that cannot do her job because they do not want to promote limitation as a principle. And she's in this element of awareness where many starseeds and awakening individuals are exploring non-limitation as a fundamental life choice and direction. And she would ask those if it was okay for a baby to have limitations. And she has gotten answers, and she can sort of pull the energy, and the Pleiadian engineers that can pull energy can see what the answers to how humanity generally answers that question, and the target audience specifically. And she came to want to bring the question here because the way that she understands life and the way that she's able to invite it is by acknowledging the process of power is only observed in context of when power isn't there. That there is a polaric experience. And in polaric experiences, whether you call them right and wrong, black and white, good and bad, polaric experiences shape a personality. And they intermingle. Polaric experiences develop in tandem to create unique experiences, especially when polaric experiences have relative amounts of involvement with each other. So, from this point of view, she suggests that polaric experiences are essential to the exploration of life and discovery of life. And she does not hold that back in her perspective. Not all Pleiadians hold this element as an ideal, but she's speaking from the experience of the choice of her occupation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we visit the idea that we had last week with Victoria about consensus living, and how consensus affects us and how we engage in the consensus, she's saying that even though consensus is an overwhelming thought and experience in itself, in such a way that we do not feel our power necessarily in it, we still choose to invite grand experiences like a consensus thought. We can essentially, from her point of view, completely bypass consensus concerns. And although that is possible, it is not being realized in such a way that people are struggling against the problems in our society, in our world, in various ways. She accepts that that is both wonderful and correct, and she also points out that it is also an element that does not have to be your choice. And it need not be simply because awakening individuals are going in that direction that is a part of your direct purpose. It is not part of the master plan that everybody solve the world's problems. There are many that are ready to, but far fewer that are required to do anything but realize that they have more choice than they've ever had before in their own awareness. And that is what the waking up is by her her definition.
Yeah, Lucinda, I've been working with a good friend of mine, Jackie Nelson, for, I don't know, 12, 13 years now. She channels a group of 9 non-physical beings that go by the name Mary, the collective name Mary. And I actually had a conversation with them last week, and we were talking about our discussion with consensus. And the point that they made that was very, very interesting was that the appearance of the lack of consensus that seems to be growing in humanity right now is above all an indication of a total consensus in order to move through this whole ascension process. And I just found it very, very fascinating to see it from that perspective.
It's a total consensus that is the individual's perfect arrangement of thoughts.
Yes.
Perfect consensus is the individual's eventual climax of all possibilities played out, whether they're intellectually solved or vibrationally attracted, it does not matter.
That was their point, was that humans, while we're visualizing it as a lack of consensus and that we're getting more and more different opinions and people aren't agreeing, what that is doing is producing all the possibilities in humanity right now in order to have them play out and then move. And the overriding idea is that we've agreed to this whole a consensus view that we're moving through this ascension process together, and that's the process. And it's just difficult for a lot of people, I think, because we look around and we see such angst, or we see many different forms of dysfunction and all of that, and we look at that maybe in a fearful way, when in reality it's part of the process of what we've agreed to in a consensus manner.
She's saying she would let it happen.
Yes.
She would say, unless you're a direct participant in it, let it take place and let it find its balanced resolution. And when you bless it with feeling that the consensus that you observe will come into alignment, you'll find that alignment with it, and it'll be exactly as you foresaw as your ideal reality. Thing is, most people are not aware of their ideal reality. Their only ideal reality is associated based off the mainstream projection of an ideal reality.
Sure.
And yet, the true mainstream comes from within us. That's the true stream.
Mm-hmm.
So, finding that alignment with the true stream will result in everything reflecting that around you. So in this way, we do a consensus thought, and we affect everything we know that everyone shares with us. But in the end, it's as if you move to a timeline in which that is already occurring. And everything already is in alignment with you. If that's clear enough.
Oh, yes. Very, very much so. Thank you.
There's one last thing she wanted to say, knowing that the period in time for this show is coming close to a close. There is a birthing process in this, and viewing it as a birthing process will give people a lot more comfort and patience to see this come through. It can take months, much like raising a child. So everyone who's been a parent can start to associate with seeing the same experience, some would call paradox, occur. And you'll know that it takes a great deal of patience as a parent to be a part of that new reality and all its potentials to find its way to the surface so that it can take place. So this idea of everything should change this red hot minute is like asking your child to be grown up fundamentally years before its time. It just so happens Pleiadians have the ability to do this, to create a child that's already several years old from our point of view. And even though that is not an experience we have with our children, this is something we can do with our reality when we already know exactly what we're committing to. And what we commit to is literally that place where when you love yourself and you can define yourself as that wonderful, perfect human being, she's saying that's the template for how everyone else will be a diverse variation of that. And when you come to that personal space and that understanding, you'll get your world exactly how you wanted it, populated by just the right people. But the broader self knows that you can continue to overcome your fears, your prejudices, your hindsights, and you can heal yourself. And that's the fastest way to heal this planet in your timeline's experience of it. Now, in many ways, that is something that she has a conversation with the new parents when it comes to speaking with the new parents. And when she is involved in birthing a child for new Pleiadian parents. And the irony is sometimes it takes them up to 9 months before they're ready for the baby and managing what's to come of that and what choices they have to make. So don't rush yourself on that. There's no point in rushing something as delicate and as wonderful as a new human experience for the planet. Okay, she's stepping out. Whoa.
How you doing?
I can barely remember what we're talking about.
It's recorded.
Okay. Gosh, the time flies, especially when I'm not able to pay attention. But, yeah, gosh, I feel like I missed my own show. I'll go back and listen to it.
Yeah, go back and listen.
But next week, I would like it to focus on a show on current events. I feel like talking about seeing how the state of everything is would be a really good exercise for everybody and us to sort of see how are things going by using literal examples of the vibration to point out, our own personal progress.
Perfect.
Does that sound cool?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Everybody in the chat room agrees it sounds cool. So, if you want to help collect some current events between now, next week, or maybe some that you've been holding on to, and we'll dive into that sort of side of things. And we won't take too much time with each one, but we'll try to get to the underpinnings of the vibration of their purpose, and even the ones that sound like they're bad news, they can be just as useful. So let's shoot for that.
Yeah, and so if anybody's got any ideas too, let us know on the YouTube comments, or let us know through Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Don and I will do the research, so we're a little bit prepared for those individual conversations.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us this time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Don, for helping me out here.
Well, yeah, you didn't lose me this time. We didn't get the video, but I stayed on.
Very good. We'll figure that one out.
Yes.
Let's see what's going on there. And I'm gonna go warm up my toes.
Go for it.
Everyone everyone else, enjoy the rest of your evening.